and maybe here we publish something, because there are some links to videos which you can watch later. And I would start with the Soviet Union, just for everyone to understand that how we came to what is today in Russia. So the Soviet Union was a totalitarian state. It was really dangerous to make any protest in the Soviet Union. So there were like a handful of people who were brave to protest, but usually they were sent to psychiatric clinics, to gulags. It was very, very dangerous. So many people, they just keep this fright of protesting in Russia, and especially elder people who remember the Soviet Union. And then in 1990s, there were very massive protests in Russia, like hundreds of people protesting in Moscow against this Soviet regime and its remains. And in 19th, after that, we had like liberal reforms, and there were many problems for people. I mean, economical problems. People had to survive, and then there was practically no public activity, no demonstrations, very few ones. And Putin very often relates to these times that he says that we don't want it to be like in 90s, so we don't want people to be poor, because when Putin arrived in 2000, he became a president. Well, it was like time of real stability, and there was a huge income of oil to Russia. So many people associate Putin with wealth and stability, even maybe it was not his achievement personal. So he remains at power since that very first time. And I looked for protests, and I found that in about 2005 there were large opposition protests, much of dissenters, and they continued through that after that time. And me personally, I joined these protests in about 2008, and there was so-called Strategy 31. 31 is an article of Russian Constitution which says that people who have freedom of assembly, they can gather freely without weapons and defend their rights. And this is just a video from such demonstration, because these demonstrations were most of the times illegal. And so there were many media. So the voice is here, but it's nothing special. Just there are no other columns. So it's very tough space, and police just gather around. This activist is now in Köln. I mean, okay, that one. Yeah, so many people really emigrated from Russia. Yeah, and this is just police. And activists in Russia, they usually pay a lot of attention to laws. We are asking what is the reason for detention, because police must legally give a reason for detention. It must warn you that you are like breaking some laws, but in fact we are just standing on the street and they are detaining us just because of that. And later in protocols they write that you were shouting slogans, you were holding a huge banner. Yeah, so you can see much here already. Yeah, and yeah, and the last question was, why do you detain me? So yeah, it was like that, and there were not so many people protesting at that time. It was like if you have 300 people demonstrating, it was a very good demonstration already. And then there was an environmental protest near Moscow. So you don't pay attention to text because it's in Russia. Just I wanted to show you some photographs. So this is when I made a talk in Aachen, there was issues with copyright. They didn't want to use copyright issues. So this is an image directly from a journal of our friends Nadezhda Tolokonnikova. She's a member of Pussy Riot, but I would talk a bit that later. And yeah, so I'll just show it like this and hope it's fine. So that was, there were different unauthorized rallies in Moscow, like the Strategy 31. And basically Russian government doesn't like any protest and tries to prevent people from protesting. But then I go to this a bit different campaign, just a very social one, not about like rights, but for a concrete forest near Moscow, the Khimki forest. Maybe some people who could hear about that. It was a pretty good campaign. I mean, it was known. And this is just one time when we were there, because we knew that some machines came to the forest, and we knew that they are going to destroy it. There was already a group of activists who knew about that, and they like monitored that. And that night we came there, and they were like, it doesn't look like any official construction site, because usually you have like huge boards that the construction starts that time, it ends that time, and it must be there must be fence around that. But here you can see nothing, just very, very shady people. And yeah, so we tried to stop them, and we came for the stand there for a night. And in the morning, a group of people like that came to our camp. First, we did not pretty understand whether they come to help us or what, but then they threatened us when they approached. So they look like bandits, some sportive group, and they had these masks on their faces. And yeah, so they just joined the workers, and so we could not block anything. And some people from them, they had nationalistic, I would say Nazist runes, like just runes, order rune, which are used by neo-Nazist movements. And actually, so we called the police because we did not want to run away from them or anything. We just called the police. But actually, the policeman, he came to these people and talked like, and we have very huge beliefs that like this is a collaboration of police with such hooligans just to stop any public activity, because hooligans, they can have like open criminal cases against them, so they can be manipulated by police, or I don't know, maybe they're just well paid. But anyway, we just observed such picture, and the police did not do anything to them, and we just blocked the police machine, so that we just felt safer with one policeman. It's already better. And yeah, so he could not go away. And also we called some media, and it was very useful, because like 12 years ago in 2010, many media, this is even like state media, Moscow channel, TV channel, this is pretty rare, but they came and they could make some footing from protests. And it was rather good one, because since that time, I don't know, I think the censorship became much worse. So I don't see it like television coming to protests. It's I think it's not happening today. And what would I say? This is Petr Virziov. He's how to say? He's a publisher of a media on the internet, which writes about like criminal cases and all that. And that media, it was deemed a foreign agent recently, so it's very hard to make an independent media. And also he recently met with the Pope, in Vatican with wives of people who defended Azovstal. So basically, activists, they just continue like some protest because and social activity. So we tried to block this when we had SME. It's always with mass media it's less dangerous, and we tried to block these machines which already worked, but it was in vain. No, I mean, yeah, for the moment we stopped them. Yeah, this is Nadezhda Tolokonnikova from Pussy Riot. She also defended the Khimki forest with us. And eventually they came like a lot of police forces, so they didn't detain any football hooligans. Probably they disappeared by that time. They defended like environmental activists and even journalists. It's pretty illegal to detain a journalist. Absolutely illegal, because this is the work of a journalist to speak about protests. But yeah, sometimes they just ignore that. And in recent years, like several years ago, during illegal demonstrations, police even beat journalists with batons. They detain them much more often. In St. Petersburg, yeah, especially there, and sometimes in Moscow. And also they like create criminal cases against journalists. There was a well-known case of Ivan Golunov, a journalist, several years ago. They just dropped some drugs into his pocket, into his backpack, and it was very dirty, but people protested, and eventually he went out. And after that, even some police officers, they were found guilty and probably imprisoned for falsification. So this was very, very unusual, because usually police, they just escape any responsibility. So, and yeah, it was a bit violent sometimes, and this is the image I made for this talk, just for illustration of the government against people in Russia. And you can also see that they use like a very, very simple bus to detain us. And after like 2 years, yeah, they bought many special police buses. And on Strategy 31 also they had buses, very simple ones. So once we just opened the back door and escaped from that bus, because it was absolutely not suited for detaining people. Yeah, and after several years they like organized much more police. After like 5 years, I think they created like special department of police, Russian Guard it's called, especially for detaining, for beating protesters, I mean for stopping protests. And this is another journalist, and they broke a bit her neck that time, so she had problems. It was very sad that time. So this is all about this time. So it was like 23rd July 2010, and people, when they watched photos of people like that, they were very angry in Russia, because it's very bad when such thugs, they attack peaceful environmentalists, just very, very peaceful people. And after some time there was an anti-fascist demonstration in Khimki. This one. So they're shouting that the road should go around the forest. This is so there was a concert in Moscow, and after that concert they came to Khimki like an organized group, and no one prevented them from stop them on the streets. And the police, which saw them, they ran away from them in their cars, and they came to Khimki administration, and they shoot from traumatic weapons. They break in some windows, and they even hacked the doors with an axe, a bit symbolically, yeah, but it was like that, and put some graffitis there with fires. It was like several hundred people, I think, mostly anarchists, anti-fascists. Yeah, it was several weeks or months after that meeting, and these photographs with people in white balaclavas, they were very popular. They were even published in Spiegel in Germany, so people in Europe watched our fight, our struggle. Yeah, so it's just how they look like. The police, they didn't find anyone from these people, but they arrested two like speakers of anti-fascist movement in Russia, Alexei Gaskarov and Maxim Solopov. I'm not even sure they were there, or I think they, even if they were probably did nothing there, but they were just like visible, so they were detained for a rather long time, and there were international actions of solidarity with Khimki hostages, as they were called. So maybe some of you heard about that. It was like 10 years ago. There were many actions in Europe by anarchist and anti-fascist groups. And about the Khimki forest, so okay, I'll just show you another video. This is 2011. We just physically tried to stop these machines, but it was pretty, well, about the Khimki forest. I should show you the map, because for you to understand this project, because to say that the route should go outside the forest, it's not very exact, because the route should go just straight, and this variant of this route, it looks like deliberately destroying a lot of forest just to use the land of the forest, and originally they planned to destroy the whole forest. This is a pretty large one, yeah, pretty large and very valuable forest near Moscow. There are not so many of them left, and yeah, and in this project there participated a transnational corporation Vinci, a French company, and probably people heard about Notre-Dame-des-Landes, Lazad. So people organized there, and it was the very same company which wanted to construct an airport there, and so we collaborated with these protesters. I also went to that and lived there for some time, and we tried to stop Vinci, and I have to say that after that, I mean, after these fascists coming to destroy our camp, and after this anti-fascist demonstration, there was a very big concert in the center of Moscow, and there were around 3,000 to 5,000 people on the street, and it was a very huge demonstration for Russia at that time. As I said, it was like several hundred of people usually, and such a big demonstration was very good. And after like several weeks after that, President Medvedev stopped this project of the route through the Khimki forest, and he said that we should reconsider that, we should think about that, and it was a very big victory of Russian civil society. But in half a year, in December that year, I think, a French minister, François Fillon, sorry, not sure about the name, but his surname was Fillon, he came to Moscow to talk to Medvedev, and he said that we have like business interests, and we should support business. And after that, Medvedev just resumed this construction because this road, you see, it's a pretty long one. It destroys the forest, and it's connected to a lot of human rights violations. And this is an absolutely ugly project, but they did it with that French company, Vinci. And there was like some victory in that, because European banks, they were going to finance that, like European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, European Investment Bank, but after making this public, after talking to these banks, and they refused to finance this, so it was like some victory. But no, Vinci did not quit this, and now this road is constructed and it's not very much used. It's pretty expensive, so in the winter they don't even clear the whole way. Yeah. And here we tried to stop the machines in 2011, just physically, and there were people protesting, there were people detained, and yeah, it was brutal, but not so much, honestly. Yeah, so they detained people. I just wanted just to compare that when people saw that I ran from police, a Canadian journalist just said that if you run from a police in Canada, they can shoot you, and they usually, so it's a bit different in Russia, so they just detain you, but they don't shoot you. At least till now. Yeah, so just okay, running away from police. But yeah, in 2011 we tried to continue, but no, we had like no other. We saw no way to stop it again, and they were like continuing to destroy the forest and all and all. And yeah, it was. And also there were like problems with nationalists again, because some nationalists wanted to join the campaign, and there were like a split in the movement because some people said that we should be apolitical and don't care, and some left people said that we should never deal with nationalists. So yeah, there were problems, but basically I think it was because the campaign was a bit over. And also I participated in a civil protest, yeah, and I was imprisoned for 10 days that time. And actually in 2011 there started very large protests against election falsifications. So I don't know, maybe okay, because in December 2011 there were elections to Russian Duma, like parliament, and there were a lot of falsifications which were recorded on video, and people spread this information everywhere on social media usually, and people got very angry, and there were like 10,000 people protesting after these elections, and after like a week they organized a 100,000 people protest, and that was like a new era for protests in Russia, because no one expected so many people to start participated in protest in Russia. So no one predicted that, and there was a very, very tough time for Russian government, because they didn't know what to do with all this protest, and they detained like hundreds of people that time. But even like these detention places, there were 2 in Moscow, and they were overcrowded, so they didn't have any resource to keep protesters, to keep everyone who they detained. And just for a perspective, after several years they constructed like a huge migration center near Moscow, pretty far away from Moscow, in the Moscow region, and it could be like 1,000 people kept there. So this is what they did after that time. So as I said, I spent 10 days imprisoned at that time, and after some time there was just another story, a campaign I would say first about this. In 2022, Putin came back to power because Medvedev was like he was not independent. He was weaker than Putin, who was prime minister at that time. It was like just a technical step to show that we have like change in president who actually doesn't change. But I would say that for activism, for people in general, it was already different, even though he was weaker, because as I said, Medvedev stopped that construction, and when Putin was even coming to power, it was already getting worse and worse. And during his inauguration, like days around that, in 2012, there was a huge protest in Moscow, and there were a lot of clashes with police. So that was an authorized demonstration, but police did not let people go to the place of the demonstrations. So there were about tens of thousands of people who went there, and they were not allowed there, and they stopped on the bridge, and there were like a lot of stones just under our legs. I mean, and they were just pieces of asphalt just running on the ground. And it was very suspicious, and the police, they were prepared, and there were people who started to throw stones at police, and I think there were actually provocators amongst these people. And for example, this man in black, I'm just standing near him, just on this photograph, it happens like that. He was actually fighting with police, and he did it like many times. So some people turned over toilets. I don't know why they did it. And this guy, he was also in the Khimki forest with us in 2011. And recently there was a counter-offense of Ukrainian forces in Kharkov region, and he was probably killed. That time he was there to distribute humanitarian supply. Yeah. And I'm afraid he was killed. Yeah. I hope he's in captivity by Ukrainian forces, but we don't know anything about him since then. But anyway, so here you can see that he actually fought policemen. He also sprinkled them with gas from balloon, and he has open face, but police didn't find him after, in any, like, I forgot, like 2 years they could not find him, and after 2 years and a half they captured Dmitry Bushenkov. I know him. He's an anarchist and anti-fascist from Moscow, and he's also like a public person because he like brings appeals for protests to mayors and all that. So he's just very well known. He didn't try to hide, and after like 2 years they got him, and there were like a special expertise to prove that these are different people, because for me it's like evident that these are different people, but there were expertise, there were advocates working on that to prove that these are different people. And I was a witness of him because I was standing near that man in black, and yeah, he really fought them. The police, this is rare for Russian protests. Usually it's rather peaceful, and people, because when you are not peaceful you just go to prison. Yeah, and people try to avoid that. Yeah, and I was a witness, and the judge ruled that Dmitry Bushenkov is guilty, and in fact they let him under home arrest, and which is very, very strange. If a person is very dangerous, he beats police, but they let him after home arrest, and he escaped Russia. He is in the Netherlands, as I understand. So, but this is how, like, quote, judgment is done in Russia. So they, if you escape Russia, it's fine, we don't care. Yeah, because everyone understood that this is a different person, but they they can't say that he's unguilty, because usually in Russian court, when you are there and police made like a criminal case against you, the judge has to believe police. It's like 90% of cases, if you are in court, you're guilty. That's all. Yeah, and I was there in 2022. There was a protest for Pussy Riot because they were in prison, and I wore a balaclava, not all the time, but yeah. And this is a T-shirt with a cross with Pussy Riot, like religion or death. Yeah, and I wanted to say more about this punk feminist group because we are like in Vienna, and I thought about artists, but no, I'm not sure that any artist came today. But
I'm an artist.
Oh, very good. Okay, there we have one. This is
very... She's also an artist.
Yeah. Okay, so this was right that I tried to speak more about artists in Vienna. And they maybe people heard about punk prayer in the Church of Christ the Savior. In general, Pussy Riot they continue. Actually, they make actions today in support of Ukrainian. For example, Masha sent some money to a hospital in Ukraine for children. They make tours in Europe. So they came, you can see that they wear very bright, beautiful clothes, and they make videos. So this is like a media activism, an artistic one. So they just tried to sing a few words and then make a video clip on that, but they were pretty soon stopped by. And this is Katya Samutsevich, also a part of Pussy Riot, but she was not even, she didn't even went to the altar that time because she was detained before. Yeah, and there were like 4 of them. They are singing Holy Virgin, redeem us from Putin. Yeah. And they criticize Orthodox Church because the church also takes a big part in like government propaganda. They are very conservative. They're against any protests. They say that, like, I would not say it exact, but like if you're a good Christian, you go vote for Putin and all that. So basically, in other words, but yeah. So I did not find, unfortunately, it was already deleted from YouTube, the video of the actual clip. And after this, they were accused in hooliganism and they were sent to prison. And they faced up to like 3 years in prison, or maybe 5 years, pretty much. And there were, of course, campaigns against their imprisonment. I'll just show you, just for illustration. Yeah, there were also actions in Vienna and many different places in Europe. And so they were imprisoned. Nadezhda Tolokonnikova, who was in the Khimki forest with us. Masha Alyokhina, she also defended Utrish. It's a natural reserve on the Black Sea, a very precious space. So I knew her from that environmental protest. And Katya Samutsevich. And so there was a very, very public criminal case against them. I was in Paris when they were imprisoned, and we created a website, freepussyrriot.org. Now it doesn't work. And we published news in 5 languages to spread the word, and also it was very useful when organizing new international campaigns, because it's very good when you know like the date when you can join the campaign. It's much easier than to just think. So we tried to coordinate people just to give some information. Yeah, and also there were some protests in Moscow and in different places. And I would say about continuation of art protests, because, for example, there was an artist, Piotr Pawlensky, and during this case against Pussy Riot, he sewed his mouth with a thread, we have censorship, and he continued his actions. And for this action, he was not accused in hooliganism. But what do you think is the way of Russian government dealing with artists? Because obviously he is not holding a banner, and it's hard to invent what law he breaks. So maybe you have some ideas.
Drugs, maybe?
No.
Foreign agency or something like that?
No, actually psychiatric clinics. Yeah. Psychiatric.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they brought him to clinics with this mouth, and then it looks like the physicians did not want to deal with that, and they said he's healthy. And but after he had some other interesting actions, like he was in a barbed wire, absolutely naked. You see, it's not very body friendly what he did. And also he nailed himself to cobblestones on the Red Square. And so eventually Piotr Pawlensky, I like his actions because they are very, very minimalistic, and they give you the message, they give you the feeling. And and for that protest on the Red Square, when he was just sitting there naked, and he nailed himself to the ground, and for that he was accused in hooliganism, but he didn't he didn't went to prison. And but still, it's a bit different from psychiatric clinics. And eventually he had to go away from Russia. Now he's in France. At least he was there. And hooliganism is exactly the same article that Pussy Riot were accused. And after some time, after Pussy Riot actions, they invented a law against offending feelings of believers, because that action was in church, but they had no law against that, and so they invented after some time, which also shows it could be legal to do it that time, because you didn't have a law against it. But it was like that. And also I wanted to say about psychiatric clinics, because there was a druid, a shaman, I think it's like a priest, a druid from some pagan religion near Baikal, Alexander Gabushev. He wanted to travel to Kremlin from near Baikal. It's like thousands of kilometers on foot. And he said that there are evil spirits in Kremlin, and we should get them out with Putin, because he's also an evil spirit. So it was a very, very public, because people were watching him walking, and eventually Putin was afraid of this shaman, and they put him also in psychiatric clinic. He's also there at the moment. And recently, in 2022, there was an actionist, Pavel Krusevich. He made some actions, but his last one was on the Red Square. He took a gun, and he shot several times into the air, and then he showed it like he was shooting himself in the head. And for that he was accused of hooliganism, and he got 5 years in prison now. This is very much, but as I say, it becomes worse and worse. So people because Pussy Riot, they were imprisoned for 2 years, and Pawlensky, he was able to leave Russia. But Krusevich, I don't see any time when he'll go out because he has this term for 5 years now. Yeah, it's a pity. It's in 2022. It's really hard to protest because, yeah, it's a very different situation. But I'll come back to it a bit later. So it was about Pussy Riot and Pavlensky. And so people were very optimistic in 2011 because there were many people protesting and we had hope for changes for the future. But since that time, there were also large demonstrations, so people were not basically disappointed, but they tried to continue that. But nothing changed much, and there was just worsening of legislation. Worse and worse, so they created these foreign agents laws. For example, I know people who are taxists, so they work in a car and they are paid by some citizen of non-Russia, like for their drive in taxi, and they can become foreign agents because they like publish some posts on their social media, and this is called like political activity. So this is very absurd. There were funds. Of course, it was mostly against NGOs because, unfortunately, people in Russia, they don't donate very much. There is not so much level of trust, and people are not used to NGOs. And many NGOs, they get grants from abroad, and this was basically against these NGOs. So they should claim themselves foreign agents, and it was very hard because if you write to an official, you write a big text that we are foreign agents, and no officials, they just try not to deal at all with such organizations. So it was, and also there were like a lot of documentation they had to do, just much more than for usual organizations. And then they also put pressure on media, because media, they had to write that such organization is a foreign agent. If they don't write it, they have fines, pretty large ones. We have much higher fines for protests, because in 2010 it could be like €6, and now it can be like, I think maybe 7 years ago it was already like €500. So it's a pretty large sum for Russia, because the wages are much lower than in Europe, but in Europe maybe, okay, I would not compare. Yeah, no. So yeah, and also they invented such a law that if you are detained in a protest like 3 times, then you go to prison. So if you are 1 time, you can go to a jail for like 10 days, but for 3 times you go like for 3 years. It was pretty nasty, and they just create such terrible laws, more and more of them. They created like unwanted organizations, extremist organizations, and for example, there were, I think the most popular oppositioner in Russia is Alexei Navalny, and he created many. He had an organization, it's called a Fund Against Corruption, and they created many branches in different cities in Russia, so it was very well organized. And the government recently, several years ago, they claimed that this is an extremist organization. Actually, they also said that Instagram is also an extremist organization. So they use it very freely. They don't have to prove anything, because all courts, they are pretty corrupt. This is called the vertical of power. So Putin controls everything. Yeah, like courts, police, and just anything. Money, oligarchs. Because this road through the Khimki forest, it was also constructed by oligarchs, friends of Putin, Arkady Rotenberg. And a lot of that money, it just went to offshores. And we just don't know at all who could it be, but who we know, it was also Putin's friend Rotenberg. Yeah, and they do it. And so I was saying about these wars, and I think we can say more about like this year, because this year it became absolutely worse, because you can basically write anything. So people are just mostly interested in people. I can. Yeah, I think it's fine. There was just another issue, just for a for a bit of art. So they drew like a symmetry and tombstone in near my door, and they told me that shut up, or this is the gravestone. It's Yaroslav Nikitenko lived in flat 69, so they wanted to threaten me because I participated in a protest to protest local park in Moscow, and the police, they didn't open the criminal case against that, and just they said this is not death threat, and yeah, I tried the prosecutors. Yeah, we tried to do. I got some help from advocates. That organization is also now unwanted in Russia, so they had to emigrate from Russia. But that time they helped me, and prosecutors, they said that you should open the criminal case. They said to police, but police wrote that we didn't find anything. We don't open a criminal case. And again, okay, we did it 3 times with prosecutors, but then we stopped. So basically, police in Russia, they are not very much willing to investigate anything. But I think if it was against a police officer, it would be very different. Yeah. So this is basically, so for now, I will just say more about these protests. I mean, about 2022. So it was pretty unexpected, and the first thing they did this year was complete censorship. For example, they said that we open like a special military operation against neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Yeah, this is what they say. And if people call it war on social media, they can be fined pretty much. So it was absolutely illegal to call it war. It was illegal to go with a banner like no to war or peace or something like that. It was called like discreditation of Russian army. Or sometimes worse, for example, if you repost an article about Bucha, about what happened there, you face prison. It's actually prison, not just some fine, because it's called fakes about Russian army. And what is a fake? A fake is not what Russian Ministry of Defense says. So they basically just lie about what is happening, and but yeah, it's efficiently censorship, because now the only point of view, the only truth is from the government in Russia. Yeah, and how to say, a friend or acquaintance of mine, Alexei Gorinov, he got 7 years in prison because there was a council of municipal deputies. He's a deputy, he was, I don't know. And they discussed some celebrations in the local region, and he said that probably we should not make any celebration because the war is going and people are dying, there are children dying. And for that they accused him like it was a prepared, organized crime using like, and they gave him 7 years in prison. But okay, I hope that he escapes prison earlier, that the regime changes. But for now, we don't know. Yeah, for now he got this sentence just for his words. That actually he didn't say anything about the Russian army. He said like, yeah, as I said. And also Ilya Yashin, another oppositioner, he posted like everything, and I mean, yeah, just true information, and he got, I'm not sure how much he got, but he's still in prison, and I don't think he will escape any soon. And they said to him that he was not imprisoned pretty soon, because he was free like for several months, which is pretty much this year. And when they detained him, finally he said to him, "Why did not you immigrate from Russia? Why didn't you go away?" And he said, like, "I'm an opposition leader, I should be in Russia," and all that. But yeah, actually many activists just went away from Russia because it was unsafe. For me, after the 24th of February, when this started, I got some calls from police. I didn't do anything at all. And it was pretty alone when I participated in some illegal actions. But they called me and they said, "I want to hand you a document that you do not go to protests." They were very much afraid, and there were like 4 people from police who called me, and they called themselves like a head of anti-crime department. So it's not like, and also like some local policemen, and also head of economic crime department. Very, very arbitrary. They just used every policeman to put pressure on oppositions because they knew me through many years before. And they also called to several people I know. And yeah, one colleague of mine, a scientist, he was also afraid because he said I did not participate in any demonstrations probably like for several years, and why do they know my address if like I'm not living like in my passport there is a different address and they know my actual address. So he was really afraid, and they put a lot of pressure, but it was like in first days because no one knew what will happen. There were thousands of people detained in Russia in protests. They were badly beaten, and some of them, of course. Yeah, there was some violence. Usually they just detain you and just imprison you for like 10 days or 30 days, somewhere between. And yeah, so there were some protests, but eventually they didn't change anything. And so now people don't protest much, and there were many single protests. For example, as I said, it was illegal to protest with "No to War" slogan, very illegal. So some people wrote just these stars where you can read "No to War." Actually, war is "Vojna" in Russian. So yeah, it's 5 stars, and everyone understood. But that was also a fake against the Russian army, and a very bad slogan. So they find that person. And recently in September or October, she drew with chalk on the asphalt that "No to Vojna" with these stars. And when she was brought to court, she said that this was not Vojna, this was about Vobla, and it's just a kind of fish. And the judge, he found her unguilty because he believed it was like Vobla. So there are actually many things, strange things happening, so we don't know where it will turn. And people basically ask, will people go on the streets to overthrow Putin? So for this I don't have any answer for now. Yeah, but the system, I think it's pretty hard because yeah, eventually I think that Putin will lose its war. Just I felt it from the very first time, the first day, because I just thought that he would not attack Ukraine because it was just it was not reasonable to do that. Originally they wanted like to capture that in 3 days, and they really expected that people will meet them with flowers. But this is very absurd because some people say that they just live in the world of their fantasies. So they are continuously lying to everyone, to Russia, to abroad, to other leaders. They are lying, and finally they believe their own lies. But the reality is very different. So if and when Putin really loses this, then it can be it will be difficult for him. So it can be a very big threat for his power. So we'll see what happens eventually. so I think that actually I just wanted to say a few words about immigration, because for me it took some time to get a place in Germany and then to get visa, and in March they expelled 40 German diplomats from Russia, because Germany expelled Russian diplomats and Russia did the same. So it was very hard, and I just moved out of Russia already after mobilization. I was lucky that I could leave the country. I went through Belarus to Minsk and then to Vilnius. And Poland, for example, they don't let people in with my type of visa. And this is pretty sad, yeah, because basically I am for like freedom of, I'm against borders, and this is not environmental friendly. I would just go through Poland to Germany, but I had to go to Lithuania and then to Poland and then to Germany just because of this. And they make some statements like, we emphasize that this is not an outright entry ban, and so we have exceptions for dissidents, for humanitarian cases and all that. We fully uphold we support opponents of the Putin regime and provide them with the opportunities to leave Russia. So it was like, yeah, it was the 8th of September this year, but all these words, they are not in like real rules for crossing the border. So I wrote a letter to head of the border station, and he wrote that, no, I won't let you in. I explained that I'm an opposition. I gave some links, but yeah, so these are just words, and it's very, very nasty when people are lying. I don't like this, because we live in a country where the government is constantly lying. So I hope that Poland will not lie like that. And for Estonia, for example, they also did not let Ukrainians in, and which is also pretty bad, because in Ukraine, of course, it's much worse than in Russia, because you face not a prison but real death from a bomb. Yeah, and so they don't let Ukrainians in, which is very bad. And recently Germany, they made like changed the law a bit, that you can enter Germany only if you have a German bank account. This is absolutely absurd, because I got my German visa, and only when I came to Germany and when I got a registration, it took some time, I could get a German bank account. So basically they're just forbidden, but in very, very such a way that if you have a German bank account, just come to us. Yeah, it's very sad. But yeah, we'll see. So this is what I wanted to say about like local and what's happening in Europe. And that's our, so I think that I'm finished, and now you can ask questions, of course.
Yeah, the first question I have is about like actually this topic. Like I read that a lot of those countries say they have to be in Russia to provoke a revolution. So if the people who are opposed to the government are leaving the country, there is not going to be a revolution or an end of the regime. What do you think about this argument?
Yeah, it's a very important topic, because it's constantly discussed, and usually people compare it to the World War II and to fascist regime, and they say that if all these people who immigrated, like Einstein or other people who fled Germany, if they lived there, like probably they would not make a revolution. They would just be
killed.
Yeah.
Same thing I say every time.
Yeah. So I think this is just a difficult and bad moment, because as an activist, I understand that Russian society is a bit divided. So there are people who understand and who follow, who like read media, but there are also like passive majority who don't do much. And the real change comes when this passive majority actually starts to understand something. For example, if Putin loses this, if their relatives are being killed at war, they will maybe change their opinion. They will, because actually when I was in Russia, there was no war. It was no war until this mobilization. But when you and your friends are threatened of going to army, then people really started to understand that there is a war going. Because for me, okay, I read independent media. There are some in Russia. You can read them on Telegram. They are pretty small, but they are real journalists who say the truth. I think they are much better than European ones because they are just very close to the place. So, but as I said, they're small, and most people just don't know that. And then there is mobilization. It's very much changes. Actually, Putin did not want to make this mobilization before, because it is very risky for him, for his power. I mean, this is authoritarian regime which says that people should do nothing. They should just sit at home, watch television, don't go to vote. It's not needed to vote for you. And the difference with totalitarian regime, that totalitarian regime, it asks people to do something like go to war and die for your country. Or in Soviet Union, there were like many people like voting because you could not vote, not vote. Yeah, and it was like very, very artificial because there were like one party, but everyone was going to vote. That was a totalitarian regime. But for authoritarian regime, you can't just simply say that, okay, you were sitting at home for 10 years, then now go and die. So this people would not appreciate that. And this is a real risk for the regime. But as I said, like oppositionists, they can organize something, they have huge experience. It is very useful, but we could not like change the general society, which is basically dependent on media, where they like watch this. But I think that when maybe there will be some new wave, as I said, in 2012 there were like hundreds of thousands of people protesting, so maybe we get some new wave. I don't know, but the truth is that like if we only take all oppositions, we won't change anything.
So you think the second wave of mobilization, I mean first phase?
No, I'm not. I'm talking about wave of protest.
Okay, yeah.
Not mobilization, because mobilization, it just goes continuously.
Yeah.
But
Putin actually said, like I think yesterday or today, that it's over, but it's actually like
it means nothing. It absolutely nothing. Just what he says. Yeah, because actually there are just people go to the army just every time. Yeah, every time. It doesn't matter. And even he said, like when he announced this mobilization, he said that we will call only those who served in the army, or like those who were trained, we will train them. But this was not in his decree. It was just words, and it was not even in his decree. But in the reality, they called like people with who were invalids, who were blind. They tried to call one journalist who was, she was like 8th month of how to say,
pregnancy.
Yeah, pregnancy, right. Yeah, it was very absurd, and they just tried to take anyone. So.
And I heard does he also try to mobilize prisoners?
Yeah, that's true.
How does that work with the political prisoners? Are they safe from mobilization, or are they?
So there is a Putin oligarch, Prigozhin, who makes tours on Russian prisons, and he has his private military organization, private military company, I think. Wagner, yeah. And he calls prisoners to join this group. So in constitution, this is absolutely illegal. It contradicts any Russian laws, and people say that it looks like it is like a bandit state, not like some real state with laws. But this goes, and he calls to these prisoners to join his group, but he says that it's their choice. So I didn't hear that someone was called to army like he was forced. No. And of course, actually there was a person who was sentenced for an action against Navalny imprisonment, and he joined the military force, but I don't think he joined from prison. So if a prisoner doesn't want to go to the army, yeah, it's perfectly fine. I mean, it's not danger.
Okay.
Yeah. But I would not choose between an army or a prison. Yeah.
So, yeah. And what happens to people who refuse to go to the army, who are not mobilized? Who refuse? Are they?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I'm not even sure that I can answer that very well, because I think that there was like one case against a person in Russia who refused to go to the army. So it goes like this. So first of all, you try to be safe. You just don't live at the place where which is written in your passport.
You hide.
Yeah, you basically hide. But sometimes they like check documents near metro in large cities, which is this is absolutely illegal, because it's stated that they can hand you a call to the army just at the place of work or at your own at your home. Yeah, but they police can't also bring people to military commissariats, but they do it. This is also absurd. And I think that many people just escape because of this many problems with legislation. But their task is like they won't mobilize everyone. They don't need it. They can't do it. They just mobilize everyone they can get. So if a person knows his rights or her rights and they protest, I think yeah, it is possible. Yes.
And they get protection from the population, from the community, like people support they're like protected by people if they want to hide and avoid mobilization.
Basically, I think that Russian people don't support mobilization much, and they understand people. But it depends on your friends. I mean, if they help you, then they help you, because yeah, no. So I think there is no like aggressive mood in Russian society that we should go and kill. No, actually, people, I think they're mostly disoriented. There is also a very important thing about public pause, because, for example, in this statement, they say like 70% of Russian people. Okay, I could not find it yet, but okay. This like politicians, they refer to public pause and say that you see like 75% of Russian people are for war. They support Russian war. But this is not true, because first of all, many people just refuse to answer any polls because they are afraid to answer, because it's dangerous in Russia today, and they would not say, so we don't support war, it's already dangerous. And the second thing is that there are like different questions you can ask, and if you ask, do you support your government in doing this is one question, and when you ask, do you support like aggression against another country, they would answer differently. And what I see from social polls, that gradually people, especially after September, they are very much want like peaceful talks with Ukraine and all that. So basically they are against war, but we don't know how many, because these are like not direct questions. They ask whether, what do you prefer, to continue this war or to, and for today I think that most people prefer, like even people who answer this, they say that we prefer stopping this.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, but there is another question.
No, I don't have a question.
Okay. I was just wondering a few things. You were talking about the border crossing to get into the European Union was a little bit difficult, if I understood well. Is it also difficult to get out of Russia?
Okay. So from the beginning of this year, after the war, all flights from Russia to European Union, they are illegal, so they are closed. There are no flights, so people should travel just on land, and or otherwise like to Istanbul, and from Istanbul to somewhere else. But it's pretty large. So for me, I'm also an environmental activist, so I prefer not to use planes. It's pretty bad transport, and it depends, because from the very beginning of war, we were waiting whether they close the border or not, and we were waiting like for any day. And after mobilization, they didn't close it yet, but maybe like 7 days before, or maybe 2 weeks ago, they actually stopped letting people out. But I mean, it was still not very general. So it was like in an airport near St. Petersburg, and also in Belarus, because Belarus has basically no border with Russia. I went there by train, and no transportation officers watched us. So it's very, very arbitrary. But Belarus, for now, they also try not to let Russian young men to go away. But I think that this is not general yet, and people just have to look for other ways. So, how to say? But I would say it's becoming harder and harder to go out.
And for those ones who left Russia, would it be dangerous to come back to Russia in these days?
First of all, I think that no one wants to come back to Russia because it's basically dangerous to just stay in Russia. Mm-hmm. I think that there is no punishment. It would be just absurd, and just if you went out of Russia. But there was another oppositioner, Vladimir Kara-Murza, who gave a talk at U.S. Congress, and he denounced. He said against Russian war crimes, and he was imprisoned for this talk. He's in prison. I don't know how many years he will get, but yeah, several years at least.
Yes, okay. I'm also asking because I was wondering, for example, if you're like active now here in the European Union, or your colleagues, if they're becoming a little bit more known to the Russian people, or I mean the Russian police does already know you. For example, your family, your friends, are they in danger if you are active outside of Russia?
So, in principle, it can be used like a form of pressure, but basically, Russian government mostly cares about what's happening in Russia. So if an oppositioner goes away from Russia, they basically don't care, because it's very hard to influence what's happening in Russia from outside. So basically all these opposition leaders who went there, they make some congress, but it doesn't affect Russia, unfortunately. It doesn't affect Russian people, Russian opposition who stay there. It's mostly here. But I don't remember cases of pressure, but yeah, maybe. For example, there was a person who emigrated, and after he or she did that, there was a criminal case against them, and they made a search at their relative's house. So this is a very nasty form of pressure, because they just take all your things. They can take your laptops, for example, your telephones. You don't have anything to work on. And this is, I mean, especially for elder people from the Soviet Union, this is when police visits you, it's already a drama, a terrible threat. Yeah, a grandmother of one oppositioner died after several days after a search. yeah, he was from Navalny structures. No, but in general, I think it's not a threat, because first of all, it's absolutely illegal, so it will be like publicized also, and basically they don't do that, but it's possible.
And yeah, is there anything you can do now, or that you expect from Europeans to do, or the West, or whatever other countries to do to support the opposition in Russia, or what do you suggest? Is there anything?
Yeah, I thought about that, and people asked me, and I think that basically people in Europe, they can support refugees from Russia and Ukraine, and also they can like affect their government, so they make people easier to go to Europe or other countries. Because for now, this is, I think this is a very, very humanitarian case, that borders are open for people who don't want to go to war and who face prison, because it's also good for Ukraine that less people go to Russian army.
But inside Russia, there's nothing more common.
No, I mean, I have no idea how we can help people in Russia, but for example, I personally, we created a little chat on Telegram where we exchange information with people, with my colleagues, and I continue like exchanging, bringing new stuff to them, just for them to know. Basically, it's information, because you don't need much, you just want your freedom, and yeah, I have no idea about support, because the situation with Putin is mostly decided at the front. So after it settles, after we understand, did he get away from that, or did he pay very much so everyone hates him, it will be different. But not even in Russia, not here.
So if Putin loses the war in Ukraine, you think Putin's gone in Russia? So like if it's like going for like 1 or 2 years, Russia's losing more and more men in the war, you think like this will end the regime in Russia actually?
I think this is a very probable way, because first of all, because even Putin, he's a dictator, but still it is based on some general support of Russian population, and if he just loses a lot, then of course there is no support. But it's not black and white that he loses or he wins, because he would not win, but the question is how much he loses. Yeah, and it can be also different, so we don't know.
The main question is what will come after Putin.
Yeah.
And how far is it acceptable that NATO is delivering weapons to Ukraine? So many weapons.
Okay, so I would not comment on NATO in Ukraine, because, well, yeah, the weapons are, I would say that Russian weapons are going to end at one time, and yeah, this is...
But what comes after Putin?
Yeah, this I would comment, because it depends on the way this Putin regime ends. For example, it can be like elite conspiracy, because Russian elites, they suffer a lot from this war, because there are economic sanctions, and this eventually looks like Putin wanted to put his trace in history, like to conquer a country, but it's unreasonable, and real like businessmen, Putin's friends, they have a lot of problems because of this, especially after he did not do everything in 3 days. So it can be like elite conspiracy, and then will come a person from that elite. But also, if there are like general population upheaval in Russia, then there can be some new opposition leaders who like had these new protests, and then there will be some, I don't know, democratic or just some very new leader. And also it can be possible that some aggressive people, like, because we know there are war hawks in Russia who say that, yeah, just drop a nuclear bomb on them and that, and in principle it can also get worse with a person like that. But yeah, we don't know.
How loyal is the army? Still very loyal?
I can't say it at all how loyal they are. I think Russian army is mostly like general population, just young people. So I would not say that they are just fond of Putin or that they are oppositions. They did not make their minds yet. But of course, when they have so many problems in the army, for example, many soldiers, they have to buy things, ammunition themselves. So they come to the army and they say that you have to buy protecting vest, how to say.
They have to pay themselves?
Yeah, they have to buy it themselves, and often they take credit to buy this to go to the army. Yeah, and this is very much, but they do it. And people who are mobilized today, they are like most people who trust most to the government and most loyal to the government. So if they die, then more anti-government people remain. But okay, there are still many of them. But and Russian generals, I think they dislike this campaign. They dislike Putin, but hard to say whether they are brave enough to do something.
They wouldn't take power. They wouldn't.
I don't know, because they didn't say anything yet about that.
No.
Everything is possible, because it's very, very disturbing situation, like a lot of things going.
Do you think it will continue for a long time, or is it?
It's very hard to say. I think that Putin will continue it when he can, but then the question is about the arms. So if Ukraine gets lots of arms, then, because basically what I feel is that they're like gaining more and more, and if they get more arms, they will gain their territory back even faster.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say, because even that counteroffensive in Kharkov region, it was pretty unexpected. They were prepared for a long time, and then they took a huge space of land. Hard to say. And then recently they bombarded the Crimea bridge. It was a very sophisticated operation, and that bridge was very important for supplying Russian troops. So yeah, the war is a very, very unpredictable thing.
Yeah.
What about the Russian minority in the east of the Ukraine?
It's
I'm personally also speaking Russian, and when I was visiting the west of the Ukraine, I saw that people were very unfriendly to me when I was speaking to them Russian and not Ukrainian.
yeah.
But they can't. And in the east, the most part of population has the Russian nationality. But as I heard, I'm working with refugees, Russian-speaking refugees, and translator for them. And as far as I heard, so children in schools are forbidden to speak Russian. It's the mother language, and they have to speak Ukrainian. Why they are not possible to do so simple things, to realize so simple things as to guarantee them their mother language?
So this is not a question to me why they don't do that. And as I know, as I know, there is no like state prohibition of the Russian language. And
I thought it is. It should be.
No. I mean, okay, there is like probably one government language, but as I'm not from Ukraine, so I can't comment much on Ukraine. This is a problem. Maybe I should look up at this information, but this is just what I heard. But actually, I visited a friend in Berlin. So she immigrated from Kiev to Moscow and then to Berlin. And she said that in Kiev, she was forbidden to speak Russian even during class breaks with her friends. But it was not like state prohibition, it was prohibited by her teachers. Yeah, and yeah, it's very, it's still sad, yeah, but it's a bit different. I mean, so for me, I don't know what will be. I can see that Ukraine, it destroys a lot of like Russian monuments, and I think there will be, if there was some hatred against Russia, it will be much more in any future. But in this,
But these are Soviet monuments.
yeah, but Ukrainians, they associate Soviet Union with Russia, as Estonia does, and also Poland, they also destroy some monuments. But people, first of all, most people just fled from Donetsk region because it was dangerous like for 8 years. And everyone who could, who wanted, they already fled. But actually Kharkov region and Mariupol, they were also very, very pro-Russian cities. And these cities are mostly destroyed during this war. So if there was some support of Russia, it will just end because, yeah, the war, it doesn't go basically in Western parts of Ukraine, which is anti-Russian, it goes in pro-Russian. Yeah, but actually after several years, I mean, in 8 years, Ukraine became much more united. So if there was division between like more pro-Russian, less pro-Russian, I think now they value their country and that they live in one country. But I think that if people speak Russian, they just won't be stopped. But even, of course, if the government creates like obligations to fill documents, even after tens of years, it will change. But for now, no. I don't know how it happens there.
I have one more question. Can you say an estimate how many political prisoners there are in Russia now since the beginning of the war? I mean, related to the war?
Related to the war.
Are there figures
So basically we hear about some very, very harsh punishments, but for rather few people, for known oppositionists. So I know like a handful, maybe 3 cases, like Gorinov Yashin and Karamurza and some other, okay, maybe 10 people. But there were many people who were arrested and beaten, like thousands of people who got fines for protests, and people who have like criminal cases opened against them. So basically this is just to show people that they should not demonstrate. This is very public, just to show how cruel it can be. But I don't think there are actually many people imprisoned for now. But in general, there are like hundreds or several hundreds of political prisons. But it very much depends on what you call political prisoner. Because, for example, there are very peaceful organizations like Witnesses of Yegova. I don't know whether you know them here. So it is basically legal in Europe and other countries, but in Russia it's an extremist organization. Yeah, this is absurd, and people just get real terms in prison for that. And there are some Muslim organizations who are also deemed extremist. And when you count such groups, it can be several hundred people. But It's not like 100,000 people or millions of people. No.
Just because of the war. No.
No, just because of the war. It's I think it's few people.
Okay.
I mean, it looks harsh, but not usually it's not prison. But if they want to imprison some particular activists, they will just do that. Because the wars, they just stopped working after
But
something.
do they lose their jobs, or the people who get fined, or who get...
So it can be, sometimes it happens that your work giver, they say that, oh, you're in a position, we won't deal with you. And sometimes government comes to work to say that your worker, he's in a position, and they put pressure on the employer. But it depends on the employer, because in general they just threaten, but they do anything much. So with work, it's usually not a problem.
From your experiences from outside of Russia now, how is your experience with the people when people are facing Russian people now? Is it like sometimes also weird, or is it like people are normal to you?
You mean me?
You and your friends and
Okay. No.
the people you know? Or...
Yeah. Actually, when I came here, in Russian propaganda there is a lot, they say a lot about Russophobia in Europe, but when I arrived here, I did not meet any. Yeah, and I actually got a lot of support, like people just paying for an autobus for me because I don't have a credit card working in Europe, and they don't accept cash, and they just paid for me and said that don't return if you are against Putin. Yeah, so people are rather nice. Yeah. They say that in Poland it's better not to say that you're Russian because there are many Ukrainian refugees. But I spoke to Polish people and there were no problems. Yeah.
How do you estimate, it's an interesting question, how do you estimate the Chechen leader Kadyrov? I guess that he's speaking very respectless, according to Putin.
Respectless about whom?
About to Putin. He said, if I could, as far I heard in Russian TV, that he said things like, if I had to say something, I would have, I don't know, destroyed everything in Ukraine at once, but something like Putin is too weak or doesn't want to.
Yeah, so Kadyrov is
So, and I don't understand why Putin is accepting this and doesn't do anything against this idiot. No.
Okay, so Kadyrov is an example of a person who could be worse than Putin, but
Yeah, much worse.
yeah, much worse, because we know that in Chechnya there are like constant murders of people, tortures, everything. Yeah, so it's much worse, but I can say that he will never become a president of Russia just because he's not Russian. Yeah, so the general population will not elect him, and
No, but he's very respectless against Putin.
Yeah, I heard that.
I heard from someone else that he would speak like that.
Yeah, actually, Russia lost its war against Chechnya, and it lost, and we pay reparations. We pay a lot of money to Chechnya, and it is called like this is our republic, but in fact, Putin does not control much there. But no, Kadyrov never said anything disrespectful about Putin. He criticizes the army and some army generals, but never Putin. You're right that he said something. If I were a commander, I would destroy Ukraine, like this. But he usually adds that, however, our commander is Putin and I obey to his orders. So basically he never said anything against Putin, and they say that in Russian elites everyone is afraid of Putin. But actually when Putin, he controlled very much elites and this people, and when there are open quarrels, it already shows that there are problems of control, because it was not before, and it is some chaos, new chaos. But no one yet said something against Putin.
There are a lot of cases where oligarchs are killed in Russia now. I think like 12 to 15, not only in Russia but all around.
Or killing themselves.
No, but not. I heard maybe 3 people or 5 people. But
there's like really mysterious. Like if you're against Putin, you probably end up dead in the bathroom.
No. First of all, I'm not sure that they were against Putin.
Okay.
First of all, second, they were probably not oligarchs, but they were like top managers of some corporations. So they were very rich people, but not yet oligarchs, because oligarch is like super rich.
Okay.
And it was very strange, mysterious, and I don't know, and I don't know whether we have some answer. It can be not just Putin, but FSB, or just, I don't know, some bandits. So in general, because it's hard to say. I know that there were like special services people who immigrated from Russia, like Skripal in Britain, and they were poisoned. And this is very much probably Putin and FSB.
It must be more clear to link to Putin, so you can be sure. I mean, like Navalny was poisoned in Berlin. Yeah.
No, not in Berlin. He moved to Kyiv. He was
transferred. But I mean, like, it was pretty clear that this was Putin, so he would be more clear with his action to make more fear in his enemy's eyes, or.
No, I don't think it was for fear. It was just to neutralize Navalny.
Okay.
For now, Navalny is in prison, so he is not a threat for Putin. So he will stay there indefinitely.
Okay.
We don't know, because they imprisoned him for a case which the European court found Navalny unguilty and made Russian Federation to pay Navalny for that case. And Russia, as I remember, they paid to him, and then they imprisoned him just because of this case. This was very absurd. And when he's in prison, they invent some new cases. So they take him out of prison, go to bring him to court, and give him some like several years more. It's very absurd. So we're not expecting him to go out in any near future. But this is an absolutely political case. Also, they shot Boris Nemtsov near Kremlin in 2015, probably. And there were links to Chechnya, to a deputy from Chechnya, and they didn't even. The police did not question that deputy. They could not. They say we could not find him, so they have no control about Chechnya. But they actually imprisoned some people who actually did it, but not those who ordered that.
You were mentioning before about some good journalists, independent journalists in Russia. Are they posting only in Russian, or are they having also things in English? Because I don't speak Russian, for example, that I could have access to, or are there news that are accessible to people not speaking Russian but English, German, for example?
Okay. So I don't read news in English basically, so I can't. I can't say you, but when I read like BBC articles or Deutsche Welle, this Radio Liberty, they make rather good footage. It's not very detailed, but they make it pretty well. And also, there work many Russian journalists who just had to go from Russia, so they understand pretty much.
Okay.
But there is also like Novaya Gazeta. They received Nobel Prize this year, and after that they were closed in Russia. Yeah, because of this war censorship. And they make like Novaya Gazeta Europe, and I think they should have something in English, but I don't read them much. Just they're like more about opinions than facts. So
one more question. Is it dangerous for you to pass through Belarus because Belarus?
Belarus.
Belarus? Because I mean, they knew you were leaving Russia, so I mean, how is that situation with Belarus? I mean,
yeah, in Belarus, so it was, I think, always worse in Belarus than in Russia.
Yeah.
Because, as I said, it's illegal in Russia to stay with a placard with stars today, but like 7 years ago, just for example, in Belarus, people, they were gathering on streets and just applauding and doing nothing, and they were arrested just for that. And they face tortures in prison, they face really harsh criminal sentences, and it's really worse in Belarus. But basically they don't care about Russian oppositioners. So if I didn't say anything against Lukashenko, they don't care.
No.
And I had nothing, but when I was going from Russia in September, my friend from Belarus, he also immigrated, he was not there at that time. He said that they can, if you stay at the railway station for some time, they can check your papers, that you are not mobilized to army, you can have some problems. So I just tried to move away from there. And at the border, they didn't ask me. But as I said, they tried, recently they stopped some Russian people going from Belarus. Of course, they work closely with Russian government, but it's still a bit different country. It's different. And yeah, a friend of mine who was an activist, he also lived in Vienna here in EKH, from Belarus. And he said that when Putin regime changes, then probably Belarus regime will also change, because Putin supports a lot Lukashenko even with his police when there were protests. Yeah, so this is a very big problem. Okay, so actually you can find me on Facebook with my name.
Okay, good.
Facebook, I don't know, actually, yeah, some contacts. Yeah. You can ask me questions, of course. Yeah, this is my page. Maybe I can open it. And yeah, if you write, we can be like in contact. So yeah, this is a photo from the Khimki forest. Yeah, by a famous photographer. This same photographer, he photoed Putin on the throne.
Okay.
Yeah, and then he came to the Khimki
Nice,
forest.
yeah.
Yeah, 2010. Okay.
Do
So
you
that's,
also have a English version? No.
unfortunately, well, if I have some news in English, then I can, then I write it in English, of course. But mostly this is about most of my friends are from Russian, and I write in Russian. But if you write that year from Vienna, and I make some different event in Vienna, I will just invite it. So it's very simple. Yeah, that's all for me. But maybe.
Yeah, that your name is written on the homepage of the archive.
Good.
So you can
see.
Yeah. Yeah, because it transliterates this to this. Okay, anyway. Yeah, I think.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for coming.